Jonathan, you have been building pretty interesting stuff in the world of data and AI, and also just technology in that sector. You've been able to be incredibly successful with two exits already, and you're working on some really exciting stuff as well here, taking advantage of what's possible with AI today. And just kind of pushing really the limits of what you can do with data while also retaining data privacy. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story and what you're up to.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Awesome. So I'd love to just go back to like some of your origins. How did you get interested in technology and building companies? What made you want to pursue a path like that in life, and kind of what led to these some of these different companies you've been building? Like, talk about your foundation. That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of a hacker since I was a kid. I think the earliest memory I remember is my dad found in the trash like old computers, and we took them apart, and he explained like essentially how the hardware worked, because like you would never just like take a hammer to a computer and then like bring it up, and that was in the 90s. And I've just been messing with computers ever since. I think they're an incredibly enabling technology. The internet is obviously revolutionary, and I've always been entrepreneurial about it. In fact, even in my teenage years, I posted signs at the local coffee shop of like, do you need IT support? Like, because of I'd been learning how computers work. In fact, I helped people out and charged for it in my teens, and it's just been a kind of computer nerd ever since. I ended up working in healthcare for a bit because I think healthcare is very important, and want to kind of to marry my technical ability with healthcare. But I could never really get away from just like coding and doing cool tech and AI and stuff. And so I ended up back on that path after grad school.
Mm-hmm. So, after grad school, this is what you were doing in terms of building interesting stuff. But I mean, you didn't have to necessarily start a company. You could have worked at other companies. You had a lot of expertise. What made you want to build companies and figure out that? And what made you kind of think that that's the best way to have an impact, in the spaces you were in?
Yeah, I think I like taking big risks. Actually, kind of funny. Like the riskiest part of my life is startups. Probably is the way to think about it. And I like learning a lot, and I also like being responsible for my own mistakes. And I don't know, I've always been a builder, and so you combine all of those and you're like, all right, let's build something that's impactful, that's a big risk, that I'll learn a ton with. Well, why not? And I'm lucky to be in that position to be able to do something like that.
So what was your first company you were building?
The first company was called Gyroscope, and it was actually a reinforcement learning AI company in like 2016, before it was all popular. At that time, it was like deep Q learning was the popular thing, and like playing video games, and it was called a gym. And that was what it was a tool that developers could put into their mobile app and mobile game to help monitor the activity and then predict like the next best action to take. It's kind of like a more advanced A/B test where it would personalize the behavior of the app or game for you, like when to drop a health potion or something like that. So that was the first company, and it turned out what that really was a stream processing engine that could handle millions of events per second. And we received some interest in the cybersecurity space, and that was the first company I sold to BlueVoyant, and we helped them essentially process millions of events per second for their threat intelligence product.
Millions of events. Are we able to process that many with that much security at the same time?
That was all. We started on-prem. Actually, it's kind of interesting. We're flipping right at that time. It was in the midst of everyone migrating, large Fortune 500 companies migrating into the cloud, saying, "Oh, I want to trade capex for opex, and I want the scalability, and I don't want to have these large teams of people running data centers." And so when we initially started at BlueVoyant, it was on premise, and then we moved into the cloud. And there are some amazing technologies on Google that allowed us to process things. So Dataflow, Bigtable, BigQuery, all of the really great cloud technologies allowed us to really handle that event set.
So you were kind of building as that was emerging, essentially.
Yeah, it was about that time that those technologies really became popular and rock standard. I mean, internally, Google had that stuff for a lot longer, but it was just becoming available for
How did
people.
the opportunity to exit from there happen? Or why did you want to exit? I mean, maybe you could have went that longer.
Yeah, there are a couple things. The first thing is that our initial target audience, we essentially kind of funnily, Google released a product that had spent more on marketing than we had fundraised, just like the honest assessment. And so we had been refocusing into the cybersecurity space, and it essentially was a win-win for us and for our investors and everyone, which is the goal, right? To maximize returns to your investors. We were really excited with the mission of Blue Voyant. We felt that our technology and our team would make a difference there. And they also on a great mission, right? They're helping protect the Fortune 500 companies, which is really the economic prosperity of the United States, and doing so at a level of like NSA level security. And we said, hey, that's actually important. Like that's going to be really impactful. You know, a lot of the GDP or gross worldwide product is lost to fraud and abuse and cyber incidents. So, like I think it's estimated like a fifth by 2030 or something like that. So it's a non-trivial amount. So I think that's important to tackle too.
Where was AI at, just in terms of affecting consumers' lives like it is today? Like, where on the scale of becoming possible was it when you were, building this first company? And like, were you already thinking about incorporating AI much more into your developments at that time?
At the time, we had seen what we called now like machine learning, and machine learning was being pretty impactful. As an example, Google Brain, which was like Google's system, had taken the fraud rates of YouTube down into like the single digits, being able to detect that fraud using completely unsupervised approaches. It was like a huge achievement. But that was very not when we think of AI today, it's about this human-like interface where it's like text or voice or speech, right? These were just about numbers and predicting things. And all of consumers had been impacted by machine learning. They're seeing it in their search results. They're seeing it in their ad targeting in 2016, 2017, 2018. But even the structured results you were seeing on Google were all, they were not statistical. They were essentially logical. That little special box that they ended up putting in the right of all Google search results. Now it's like much smarter, but then it was just structured data. So we were seeing the beginnings of machine learning, but we weren't in this. I don't think we had really finished solving image analysis yet. Now it's like, oh, I want to see if there's a ball in the image. It's perfect at detecting it. But back then, people were talking about like ResNet 50 and all of the cool stuff to try to do image analysis and detection. So it was just the start.
Mm-hmm. So when you decided you were going to build a company again after the first one you exited, what were you thinking, you could do different that you learned on from the first one that you were going to apply to the second one?
It's kind of interesting. You'll see like a flip-flop in my routines, but the first company we built, the lesson that I had been taught was build it and they won't come. And the logic for that was essentially, most engineers are like, I'm going to build this cool thing and people are going to like it. And that's not how businesses work. Like businesses go to their customers, understand deeply their problems, and then are uniquely positioned for some either expertise, capital, contract, whatever, to be able to solve their problem in a unique, a differentiated way. And then you kind of build on, I understand the customer, I understand their problems. Now I can build a solution for them. And I happen to have the technical ability to do it. It's like a pyramid, right? And what interestingly is on the first company, we did that. We went and talked to customers and built the thing that they wanted. The second company, it initially started as building something that we wanted. And the reason why we did that is we thought it was a short circuit or shortcut, I should say, trying to get past the initial customer discovery stuff, because we were building something for ourselves. And we said, hey, we've been dealing with this same problem in data science and data engineering for the last 10 years. people need this. And bit.io was a way to store, query, and share data in a GitHub-like manner, just like you can share code on GitHub, but to doing that with data itself, with the model of a database. And so we just skipped that step. We did the build it and they won't come step. And that was a gamble in and of itself, but it was a speed up. So it's hard to know how to do it, but that was a definite difference.
Were you working at Databricks for a little bit after they bought you guys?
I did. That was after they bought our second company.
Yeah.
So we built bit.io. It started as this system for storing, querying, and sharing data. It became a serverless Postgres company, and in reaction to user feedback. All that everyone wanted was more Postgres features, more and more Postgres features, and they wanted. We had essentially you could onboard in 2 clicks on our system, right? You didn't even have to sign up to get a database and start querying it, and integrating it into your app. So Databricks acquired us, bit.io, about 2.5 years ago, and I did come over with them and work on their team. It's now public. They have this thing called Lakebase, I believe. That's what we were building.
So did you start to think about like protection of data with AI and with how models were using data? Was that something that was developing at that time? Because you were having, incredible exposure to, the operation at Databricks. That's just an amazing company, and they're sifting through so much data all the time. Was that kind of like thought process developing then?
Yeah, I think between working in cybersecurity and being really aware of the cost of poor security, and working at Databricks and seeing the scale, Databricks, it's interesting. Databricks is in some ways processing data, but in some ways is just providing the software for the consumer to run in their VPC,
right?
Their environment, their cloud, to process the data. But AI really magnifies this privacy security trade-off, the privacy cost trade-off, because if you want to do real AI, you need multiple H100s or H200s. You need multiple chips, and each set of them, each 8x set of them that works on one rack, is essentially like $25,000. No, $250,000. Like each individual H100 is like $30K. And so what that means is, if you want to process the data securely, you have a choice to make. You can pay a bunch of money up front for these things, or you can sacrifice your security and do multi-tenancy, where you're sending your data to somebody else. And anytime you send your data to someone else, you're reducing its proprietary nature, its secure nature, just definitionally. Let's just assume, you give out anything, even if it's in a locked box, it's less secure than the minute before you had it. And so as I saw the trend at Databricks and all of the security challenges and concerns that their customers have in the enterprise, and as I saw the importance of privacy and security working in cyber, I said, I think that there's a gap, that there's going to be a question, which is, how do I have a model that I control and data that I control and compute that isn't going to burn a hole in my pocket? And that was kind of the area I was interested in when I left Databricks.
How did you figure out how to build something around that? Because, the introduction of a lot of these models, they're changing all the time. There's always new models. You probably have to adjust what you're building to that. What was kind of the starting point for you?
I asked, it's kind of like the 3x3 table or whatever, the standard analysis. And it was a personal quest is where it started. And I said, well, how do I find a large model, like a really good one, that has open weights, that I have privacy and security guarantees? That's where I asked the initial question. And I could not find one for a consumer. Or if you're a developer, you could go sign up for Bedrock or something like that, and you could spin up a cloud account on AWS and use it, and that sucks. Really, if you're just trying to get personal usage. And if you want a large proprietary model with privacy guarantees, you could use Apple's system, Apple's private cloud compute. That had just came out last year, the white paper. But it's a proprietary model. You don't control it. You can't customize it. It only runs on Apple's compute. It's not available to any consumer outside of like email summarization and notification summarization, a couple other features on the iPhone. And so I had looked at that and said, wow, this is an incredible 10x better way to do privacy and AI. And what's hidden underneath that is a way to do multi-tenancy, aka lower the cost of entry, but keep the same security guarantees, right? Put simply, Apple wasn't going to give every single person their own H100 NVIDIA chip. They had to figure out how to spread the load across it while keeping security. That's where I started. And when I saw that come out, I said, wow, this is so much better. Like, this is going to be an enterprise need too, right? People are going to not want to make that trade of the high cost of being secure, for like multi-tenancy, low entry fee, all that stuff.
So just in like kind of a, I wouldn't say like super technical way, but just kind of like a more broad view, how does the technology work?
It really, there's like kind of two core components. The first thing is that, and this is subtly but very important, is it anonymizes all of the data that goes to Apple. And we can talk about the technical details, but fundamentally, when Apple receives an AI request from your phone, they don't know who it came from. And that's really important, because then if there were an attacker, whether it's someone inside of Apple or a third party, it'd be very hard to find the person because they can't look at the metadata and figure out who it is. The second thing, and this is, I think, where like I'm just going to describe something at a very high level, and all analogies are a little inaccurate, but in standard encryption, you and I have a shared secret, right? If we're using Signal and we're chatting with each other, it's end-to-end encrypted. I send my data encrypted, you receive it, you can decrypt it because we have a shared secret. Imagine that you could only decrypt it like if you were at home or if you were running a certain version of iOS or something like that. If you think of it, that's like adding additional constraints onto how you can decrypt the data. And so what Apple does is essentially can only decrypt the data for your AI request if it's running the code that they promise to be running. And that code is guaranteed to not be accessible by an operations engineer. It's not going to log your data. It's not going to resell it. It's not going to be used for training. And there's a way to verify that they're only doing those things. And so the decryption is kind of tied to what's going to be done with the data afterward.
So how do you see yourself kind of bringing this out more? Is it towards your targeting companies and explain to them like this is more of an implementation, or is it like something that they can just kind of do themselves? Where is it at in that sense?
So we have two options in the product. We're very early. We came out of stealth just about last month.
Wow.
So we're certainly looking for design partners. But there are two options. First, we're like a drop-in, before I say the two options, we're a drop-in replacement for OpenAI APIs. So in the industry, all LLM APIs, the programming interfaces that everyone builds their apps against, are the same. So everyone's adopted this standard. So it's very easy to swap between Claude and OpenAI or Mistral, or like name your vendor, name your model, name your vendor serving that model. It's very easy. So they can either, someone who cares about the security of their data, and that's people who care about compliance or who have trade secrets, like the media, like legal, like healthcare, like finance, they can either bring a custom model to us and we can serve, like bring the hardware, bring the security, and give them this huge security win, essentially. Or they can take our software and run it themselves and pass that benefit onto their customers, right? If you were a bank, maybe you would run it internally so that your customers would get those privacy and security guarantees.
And it seems to be, it's pretty simple to implement. I mean, just swapping the APIs out. That's pretty simple.
Yeah, that is, on their part, it's super simple to implement. On our side, it's one of the most complicated systems I've built, and I've built serverless database systems now at this point. But that's the product, that's the difficulty, and that's their benefit. So,
Jonathan, what do you see the impact of this being? For these companies. I mean, like, what is the next, just in general, what does the next 5 to 10 years look like with this technology being in place and scaling?
So we do think that this is going to become the standard. It's not just us that's building it. Apple already built it. Meta is in fact integrating almost verbatim the same stuff into WhatsApp for this thing called private processing. So we do think it's going to become the standard over the next couple of years. And it unlocks a couple things. There are still, believe it or not, people out there who cannot use AI yet. There are, I mean, there are the tech people who are like, AI is taking over the world. And yes, it offers some really clear value, but there's still a lot of legal departments that say, do not give your data to ChatGPT, whatever it might be. And for those businesses that want to continue to keep up and maintain a competitive advantage, they eventually need to unlock access to AI. But it's a question of how can they do that while making sure that they don't have a huge bill up front, like no one wants to buy a bunch of GPUs, but also still keep the security in place. So we really see it as unlocking access to AI that a lot of people don't yet have. And that's just going to play out over the next couple of years.
And just like a broad question, where do you see AI being most impactful just in general? I mean, you're building in the AI space, you're trying to accelerate it. How do you see AI just changing people's lives the most?
I'll answer. We can talk about consumer a little bit. I think in the enterprise, the thing that's to me most clear is that it's really good at reading a lot of things really quickly and getting like 80% of the way there or 90% of the way there, depending, right? If you have 100,000 docs, let's say you're GE and you have like so many contracts with like all of these vendors, huge complicated supply chains. You have teams of people doing third-party risk assessments and other things. You can trade a lot of that work for an AI to just read, right? Effectively read, right? It reads the thing and says, here's the concepts overall. Ask that esoteric question and get a quick answer. And so I think that's going to be hugely impactful for people who just have like a deluge of data that they need to process and automate. We're seeing it, obviously we're seeing a ton of impact on software. It's kind of the same thing, right? I need to read this whole 1,000,000-line code base and then make a small change. Well, how do I do that? Well, I have an AI that helps me read it, and then I bring a little bit of my own expertise as well. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes there. I think that on the consumer side, it's going to be a fascinating 5 to 10 years, but I think it's all about customization and personalization. You no longer need to we've seen that in the internet over and over again, the more personalized things can become. But I mean, if I use this tool called uTori, which is, I know the founders, it's cool. You essentially specify a search query for an AI, and then it just combs the internet constantly in the background every day and tells you whether it's found something related to that. That's like a complete shift from like going to Google and like typing in a generic search that like is slightly personalized to you and your ads essentially. But this is like, find me the exact things. And it's like looking for hacker news posts that talk about this and that, or it's looking for sovereign AI initiatives that I'm really interested in. And it's doing a great job, like giving me that information personalized to me, without me having to rely on a generic app to do it. So I think we're just going to see more and more of that, where you're able to say something specific for your exact need, and then the AI will be to satisfy it. Whether it needs to write code to do that or not, I don't know. But I think that'll be interesting, essentially personalized apps, so to speak. Or the notion of app might even go away.
Well, Jonathan, that was all the questions that I had. I appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I think it's really exciting what you're building, and privacy is so important. Sometimes it gets, kind of forgotten about with new innovation. And now implementing it in a way that seems to be not complicated with what you're doing here. I mean, that's a game changer. So I'm really confident that there's going to be a lot more to come from you, and I'm just excited to see what's going to come next.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, privacy is important. It's sometimes second, but then when a big breach happens, you're like, oh crap, well, we should have done this right. And so we're here and ready to help.